Hello, welcome back to my kitchen. I recently made a video talking about food storage, why you need it, what to think about, all kinds of questions. And one of the things in my food storage that's really important is canning meats. I have limited freezer space because we live off grid. Every freezer uses a lot of power. We do have two along with the refrigerator, but they still use a lot of power. So when I find a good deal on meats, or if I think that it's the good quality for whatever reason and I want to stock up, there's only so much I can put in my freezers. So that's when you get out your canner and your jars and you start jarring it up. So I went yesterday and picked these up. These are boneless, skinless chicken breasts. It's not the cheapest I've seen, but they look good and they're good quality. So I picked up 2 packages of these, and I have a few others that were frozen. So I've got right around 9 to 10 pounds, probably closer to 9 pounds. So I am going to raw pack this today. I have done hot pack and broth, and I love that, especially with boneless, skinless chicken thighs is my favorite way to can those. But I do like to always have on hand boneless, skinless chicken breasts that have been canned. And I like the raw pack because there's so many meals that I can put together out of other jars out of my pantry, opening up a can of chicken. Some people call it ugly chicken. I don't. To me, it's just raw packed chicken, and that it's different from my jars that have broth in them and the chicken thighs that have a firmer texture. This tends to shred more, which is very useful in some things. So today we're going to can up chicken breasts. Start with clean tools. You always want to start with clean tools. And I have already washed my jars, and we are not going to heat those today because we're raw pack. And raw pack means it's going to start out cold. So your water in your canner starts out cold, and it's a pressure canner. You must pressure can chicken. And your jars are cold. You start out with everything very clean, and I'm just going to cut this in chunks. I'm not really particular because, like I said, it goes in the jar as chunks, but it comes out sort of in chunks, but it shreds very easy. So that's usually how I'm going to do it. So about that big. And this actually doesn't take very long if you have boneless, skinless chicken breasts. If you have to remove skin and bone and fat, if you remove fat, I always leave a little bit. It doesn't bother me. If you have to do all that, it's going to take you a little bit longer. And it's not bad cutting them up totally thawed. But I almost prefer cutting them when they're just slightly frozen because they cut very easily. Just wanted to show you the difference. These were all raw and defrosted. This chicken breast I took out of the freezer, and it's huge. I mean, what am I going to use it for other than cutting it up for something? So it is just slightly frozen. It gives, but it's not all the way. And I'm going to show you how easy the knife goes through. So if you are able to do that, it actually saves you a little bit of effort because the knife glides through it easier. So I got my very clean jars, Again, they are not hot. We don't want that right now. I'm using wide mouth pints. You can also put this in quarts. I highly, highly, highly recommend wide mouth, whichever you use. And you'll see why very soon. Put your canning funnel on your jar because this does get messy. And although there will be some things getting on the rim as we go through this, keep as much off as possible. And now you just start to fill the jars. Now you're going to get about 1 pound to 1 pint jar. No, Bandit, you're not getting any of this. I know I said you're gonna, but you're not gonna. So just forget about it. And the object of this is to fill all of these gaps. So you are going to have to get your hands dirty. And I usually do this as I go because I think it's easier and does a better job. So I will debubble it before I do anything because I want to press this meat down there really, really well. And my experience is if you really pack the meat in there well, you're gonna get really close to 1 pound. It's not always exact, but it's pretty close. Especially when you're starting out with boneless, skinless, because you're not having to cut much away. And I cut almost nothing, just a few little red pieces that I didn't like. Nothing wrong with them, I just didn't like them. And when you think you have the jar full, you can still add more to it. You're gonna have 1 inch of head space, which basically means you want it to be to this ring, this bottom ring right here. So that one's a little big. I need a smaller piece. And there we go. That's really close to 1 pound of meat. And I see another bubble, so I'm gonna go take care of that. And you also want to debubble because you don't want any air pockets. Now, if you don't have one of these nifty little debubbling tools, you can use a plastic or wooden utensil. You know, the handle of a wooden spoon works pretty well. If you have plastic ones like that, you don't want to use metal when you're doing this on your canning jars. And even though this is thin, it really does pretty well because it gets down in those little spaces and you can maneuver things. So as I said before I started cutting this up, I had a little over 9 pounds and I have 9 pint jars filled. So see this little half pint? I'm gonna do this. And that may look silly, but you know what? That's half a pound of meat if it fills it. And that's a serving. It's not quite, so I may take just a touch from some of these other jars. So by just cutting little bits off of some of these jars, the jars are still pretty full, and I got a full half pint. You try and keep things off the rim, but as you can see, you're going to get things on the rim of these jars. So I start out just with just very slightly damp paper towel, and I wipe them down. I'm not cleaning at this point. I'm just getting any loose meat or grease that's on there, and we'll follow up and make sure they're thoroughly clean, because you have to make sure there is absolutely nothing on that rim to keep the jar from sealing. Now what I'm going to do is, I have some white vinegar in a bowl, and I'm going to use that to wipe the rims, and I'm going to do this 2 times. So I'll go through and wipe all of them, and then go back with another clean paper towel and wipe them again. Start with a new cloth. So there we go. I've got my 9 pints and 1/2 pint. And I'm not going to throw out this vinegar that's left over. You could add this to your canner, and I already have added some along with the 3 inches of water that my All-American canner requires. But I will save this, and tomorrow, after my jars have totally cooled, I will clean them with vinegar added with a little water. And so it doesn't get wasted, and I make sure my jars are completely clean. I have my lids heated up, and I have this nifty little rack that I've never used yet. So I'm using it today. That's better. Finger tight. I am not putting any pressure on the jar, but it's on well enough. You don't want to crank it down. And some of you know all this, but I have recently found that a number of people have not really done a lot of this. So I'm going to try and be thorough today. So finger tight, and that jar is ready. Now, if you're using the new SureType lids, if that's what you have from Ball or Kerr, it says not to do this, but in my experience, I even heat those up. They do better than if I don't. I just have better luck doing this. Don't boil them. I just heat it to soften that sealant. So again, putting these into my cool pressure canner. I have the All-American. It says to put 3 inches of water in the bottom and use a bottom rack. So I'm going to put these in there right now. So that's what it looks like. For those of you who are new, that's how it looks in the canner. I have my All-American with the 3 inches of water before I put these in, and then I put a rack on the bottom. And I've got 7 pints on the bottom layer. Now, because I have more than that, and this is a large enough canner. This is the 921 All-American, and I can add more pints on top of this. But be sure and use the rack, because you don't want the other jars sitting directly on top of the seals. Put my 2 other pints in here on the top rack, and my 1/2 pint. Brian asked me to can 2 1/2 pints of glycerin that he uses somehow in his beer making. I don't know. So I'm going to add them in there. If you have other things you can can jars of water for emergency purposes, sterile water. You could can beans in with this. Whatever it is needs to be able to take the full amount of time. And because this is meat, and I'm canning pints and 1/2 pints, you can the same as pints, I am going to pressure can them for 75 minutes at full pressure. So that is one of the reasons you have to make sure there's plenty of water, because that's a pretty long processing time. Now, if you're going to do quartz, it needs to be 90 minutes at full pressure. And I'll explain that a little bit more. Now again, for the people that are new, and even people that have been canning for a while, there's this nifty app that you can get on your phone called Canning Timer and Checklist. And this basically walks you through the entire canning process. So if you just need a refresher, or if you are starting out for the first time, I highly recommend this. I showed my sister how to use this when I taught her to pressure can, and she absolutely loves it. You go in and you decide, are you canning vegetable, fruit, meat, seafood, or pickles? And I am canning meat. So it comes up to the next. Chicken or rabbit with bones, chicken or rabbit without bones, stock, broth, red meat, and it goes down the list. I'm doing chicken without bones. And pints or quarts, I'm using pints. What kind of pack? It's hot or raw. And again, this is raw. And how are you canning? Dial gauge is generally Presto and Miro. You can get weighted gauge for those, I believe. I'm not really sure. But All American is a weighted gauge, which means you're going to put this little weight on there for your altitude. So I'm going to use weighted gauge. Then you choose your elevation. Well, I'm at 5,200 feet, so I'm between 4,000 and 6,000 feet. And now it's going to show me that, make sure that all my choices are correct. And I hope y'all can see this. Continue. Prepare your jars, lids, and rings. And you have to go through and check things off. 2 to 3 inches of water in the canner. Prepare the food. Fill the jars, bubble, and wipe the rim. Adjust the lids and rings. Place the jars in the canner. Now I have to fasten the lid securely on the canner. So let's do that. So for the All-American, you have a little arrow right here on the lid, and you have a notch on the canner. And you need to line those two up when it closes. So you'll start with it a little to the right, and then you'll turn it until they line up. Sometimes it's a little bit stubborn. And then what you want to do is take opposite sides. Now, if you're using a Presto, it's going to be different. This does not have a gasket. The Presto and Miro use gaskets, and they do not have the same kind of seal where you do this. Opposite sides. And what you want to do before you tighten it, you want to look and make sure that it's pretty even. I'm a little bit off here, so I'm going to loosen that. Tighten that side a little bit more. And this is to make sure that you have a good seal. Because when you're putting all this pressure in here, you want to make sure you've got a good seal. I'm not putting them on really tight right now. This step is almost just kind of like leveling, but now you go back opposite sides and really turn them. All right, I'm confident that my lid is on securely. And I am going to turn this on. Again, it's totally cold right now, and so are the contents. And I'm going to put it on about a medium heat on my stove. Now, medium on mine, maybe medium high on yours. You don't want to shock the contents. So I usually start out around medium. You'll start seeing steam come through this little vent. That's what you want to see. So we're going to bring this up slowly to heat it up, and we're going to wait to see that steam. And at that point, when it's a full steam column coming up and it's steady and it's not just sputters, you want a full steam here. At that time, we're going to set our timer for 10 minutes. Which brings us back to our canning app. So we have fastened the lid securely on the canner, and this says turn the heat to high. Again, mine is different. Yours will probably be set for high. And then you say next. So what happens now is once there's that steady stream of steam, you want that to flow for 10 minutes. Leave the heat where it's at. You want that to evacuate the air and create the pressure. But this even gives you a timer. We're not going to start it yet. We're just going to let this come up to temperature, start to steam, and then we will turn on the timer. And I'll bring you back. All right, it's taken a while to get up to temperature, and I'm not sure if you can see. Light just isn't that great, but you can see the steam there. That's what you want to see. And now we start the timer. So 10 minutes, and leave your temperature where it is. All right, my timer went off, so I hit next, and it says step 3, build pressure. Place the weight or close the petcock and let pressure build to 15 psi. Now, mine has a weight, so I'm going to put that on now. And because I need 15 pounds of pressure, I'm going to put the weight on so that it's on the 15. And although there's a little bit of pressure built up, we have to wait until it gets to about 15, and on this gauge it's going to read about 13.5 is usually what it is if I'm using my gauge canners also. But I have my 15-pound weight on there, and I'm just going to let this build up pressure until this starts to rock just about once or twice every minute. So we'll come back. Okay, it's come up to pressure, and again, that's a 15-pound weight, but on my gauge, and it seems to match what happens on my gauge pressure canner, right around 13 to 13.5 pounds of pressure. But we've got this rocking quite a bit right now, so what we need to do is reduce the temperature, and this is going to take just some time and patience to find out exactly where your burner needs to be to keep it at the right pressure. We don't want this rocking continuously. So I need to play with the temperature. I know about where it goes, but I need to play with the temperature until I get that to rocking one time, maybe 2 every minute. So I'll be working on that, and then we'll come back in a while. This has to can now 75 minutes at this pressure. Do not let it go below that pressure, or you have to start the timer all over again. So stay close, keep a close eye on it, and make sure that you are keeping it up to pressure. So I let this process at 15 pounds of pressure for 75 minutes, 1 hour and 15 minutes. And that was on my timer for the canning app. So at that point, as soon as the timer went off, I turned the burner off, and I have let this sit. And there's my dog. But we are now down to 0 pounds of pressure. And we're going to check that. Again, for those of you that are familiar with canning, you probably already know this, but it's for these people that have not done canning before and need help. So there's a slight hiss, but it's pretty much gone. So I'm going to take the weight off. Now, I'm going to wait 5 minutes. I know it's hard, but believe me, it's worth it in the long run. So I took the weight off. I'm going to put my timer on for 5 minutes. All right, I have let this sit for 5 minutes. And these are warm, but not real hot. Now I'm going to loosen the lugs on this. I'm going to remove the lid away from me. Always, always, always remove the lid so that any steam will go out away from you. Now, I'm going to wait 5 minutes. So we're going to put the timer back on. I've let this sit for another 5 minutes. So it's pretty much a total of 10 minutes time sitting. And this is what it looks like. And it is still boiling in the jar. So be very, 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 very careful. I'm going to remove these to a cloth on my countertop because you do not want to set this directly on a cold countertop. And try and place the jars probably about 2 inches away from each other. They need room for air to circulate. Now I like to use the handle of some kind of flatware. It works pretty well, just to lift that out of the way. And now we have all of our jars of chicken that were in the first layer. I want to show you, I just took all the jars out of the canner, and that water is mostly clear. There's a little bit of haze on it, but mostly it's clear water, which means the jars did not evacuate and cause any siphoning, which would show colored liquid. It would show grease, but you know what? It's mostly clear. And the way you can avoid that is waiting patiently for that 5 minutes and then that 5 minutes. So here are my jars. And I know you can see they are actively boiling. The glycerin, not really, but they're fine. But all of these jars of chicken are just boiling like crazy. And that's okay. So at this point, leave them alone. Don't touch them for at least 12 hours and preferably 24 hours. Don't poke the tops to see if they sucked in. Don't do anything. Just let them sit in a draft-free spot on your countertop with a towel underneath it to protect from shock. And just wait for the magic to happen. Don't touch them. I know it's tempting. Believe me, I know it's tempting. But you don't want to cause a false seal. So leave them alone. Let them come down totally over 24 hours. And then if you check them and there is no pop when you touch them, again, after 24 hours, then that's a good sign. I will come back and show you what I do tomorrow night. This video is a little bit long, but I really wanted to go into details for the people that did not know all of the steps. Now this is the leftover vinegar from yesterday. I'm going to add just a touch of water. And that lid came off very easily. This is how I check to make sure for a good seal. I've taken off the ring after 24 hours, and I lift by the very edges of the metal lid. I do not try and touch the glass at all, and I lift it up. Now, this is not a full guarantee, just because sometimes, and it doesn't happen very often, in fact, very seldom, but once in a while you will get a false seal and it will still lift up like this. And after days, months, whatever, you will have the seal fail. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just clean the jars, and this is a mixture of the vinegar and water. And mostly this is to get any residue off, any spots of grease or anything like that would cause critters to be attracted to your jars. Now, you saw that the water was pretty clear after these were finished. But I will still do it. You know what? Dogs, cats, and all kinds of animals have really strong sense of smell. And if they smell the meat, they're going to try and get to it. So this is just an extra step that to me is totally worth it. And you just want to clean it. Now you can clean this with soap and water too. However, when it's meat, I will usually do that and then clean it again with vinegar if I think that there's any chance. If my water is not quite that clear, I would probably do soap and water first and then this step. But because I saw pretty much nothing in these jars in the water, so I am going to just clean this way. And I have to tell you, I'm being distracted because I just went and picked up some peeps, some baby chickens today, and they are just in there peeping away, letting me know that either things are good or bad, I'm not sure, but they just ate finally, so hopefully it's all good. So here's what you get. This was 1 pound of meat, and it has shrunken a little bit. It's kind of shrunken in and down just a little, and there's broth with just a little bit of fat in there, which is not a bad thing in my book. So that is ready to go on the shelf. I will not put the rings back on. Some people do. If I were to do it at all, it would be very loosely, as in you could feel it give. And that's only if I were going to stack a piece of cardboard and then another set of jars on top of it. I don't do that. The reason I don't do that is if there's a false seal, I want the lid to pop. I want to know it because I don't want to take any chances on the product going bad and me not knowing it. It's just one of the ways that I safeguard my family. So I've cleaned it, and I can lift it without the rings, lift it by the lid only. I normally will put these on a shelf by themselves, or I will put them in a canning jar box and then store them in my pantry. These never last long because we use them all the time. This makes absolutely wonderful shredded chicken for Mexican tacos, if you want to make barbecue sauce with it. Whatever you want to do, this is open this jar, open something else, pour them together, heat them up, and you have supper ready in minutes. It's not the prettiest, but I will tell you, I mean, a lot of people complain about how ugly the inside of the jars are when you make this. You can see there is a little bit of residue on the inside, but mostly the meat has shrunken and is all in one piece, or it appears to be. It's really not that bad, but it tastes wonderful. I've also heard people say it tastes like tuna. I don't think it does. I think it tastes like chicken. So you have to decide for yourself. I will say this is one of those things I want on the shelf all the time. If I want to make a quick supper, I can do so many things with what's in this jar. This is one meal. You can't beat that. And while we're on the subject of canning, a while back, and several times I have shown you this, and I want to do an update. I got a whole lot of boxes of these very, very, very old curd canning lids. 43 cents. That's been a while, right? These, let's see, the brassy color, and then on the back side they are kind of a gray sealant, but they're very heavy, and there is a lot of sealant on these. But because they were so old and they had been stored, I don't know how and for how long, a long time, I decided, I have to wipe the dust off because it's been sitting a while. I decided to test it. So this was jarred up on September 19th of 2020. Today is May 7th. So this has been about 8 months in the jar. I have just left it sitting on my countertop, mostly so I don't forget about it, because I have a lot going on and I will forget about things. So I just want you to see, I am lifting this solely by the metal. And this is some water, but this still has a really solid seal after 8 months. And this is one of these very, very, very old lids. Now, if you get your hands on them, I just recommend you do the same thing. Run a test. There's nothing worse than jarring up your food and putting your time and money into it only to have the lid fail. Which is why I am testing this. So if you get your hands on it, this is what I recommend. Run a test. Use one, jar up some water, pressure can, water bath, whatever you're going to do, and see if it's going to hold up. At this point, I don't think I have any concerns about using this for my food. If I do, I will come back and let you know, but I think this will be my last update on this simple jar of bottled water. And I am confident that the seals are going to hold at least as well as these, maybe better. As I said, this sealant was so wide and so thick, and it didn't dry out, it didn't deteriorate. It's holding a really good seal. So I hope that gives someone some help, some ideas. And if you've never pressure canned, especially meats, don't be afraid. Follow the steps, cleanliness, process. Use the canning app, it works. Get yourself some jars of meat on your shelf. You're going to love them. I'm going to try and show more videos of how to use these. But sometimes it's just grabbing different jars off my shelf and throwing them together, and they come out wonderful. So if you have not watched my channel before, please go down below and hit the subscribe bell, hit the notification bell, because if you don't choose that, and if you don't allow notifications on your device, you won't know when I upload a video. And I never know what I'm going to upload because it's life and it's what I come up with. So thank you for watching. God bless, and we'll talk soon.